And I'm thinking, man, I can't afford this shit, man. I got,
Oh, you're immune compromised.
well, they tell me I'm in remission.
Right. But you don't,
But,
you don't want to take the chance.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Good morning and welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill Unitarian Universalist. My name is Bill Rote. I'm a member of the Worship Associates Ministry here at the church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived at this beloved place, you are welcome here. In standing with our desire to be an inclusive community, this side of the church, we're able to sit wherever you'd like. Over here, please remember, there are places with blue tape where we ask you not to sit so that people can be separate during this COVID time. We have a gathering out in our courtyard after the service for coffee hour. Out here in the courtyard is mask optional. There is a gathering behind the Jones building, in front of the porch in the grassy area, and over in the playground, which is a mask mandatory area. We're glad all of you are here today. Would like an announcement that we are going to have greeting of the church after the service, and would like for you to stay and just come in after coffee hour. I ask you to turn off your phones while we're here today, and we welcome our guests, our newcomers, and we have for you on the back of the order of service, welcome guests and newcomers, a little bit about our church. We're glad you're here today. We're going to go to an announcement for the Community Day of Service by Ray Dawson. And immediately following that, we'd like you to stand and join us in our opening hymn, number 389. Thank you.
Let's see. We're here to let you know about our church's annual day of service. Guess what? It's back for 2022. Save the date, March 5th. That's the day we're going to go out into our community and do volunteer projects. Projects like cleaning Charles House, packaging treats for Meals on Wheels, helping clean parks in our community. We hope you can join the team. Speaking of the team, I'm Yogi Berra, as you can no doubt tell. And my team is here with me, as you can see. We're going to throw the ball around the horn as I explain the details of our March 5th day of service. At shortstop, we have Babe Ruth. Heads up, Babe. Here it comes. As you can probably tell, this year's theme is baseball. We want you to help us knock the ball out of the park as all of us demonstrate the best of our caring, talented church community. At second base, we have Willie Mays. It's coming to you, Willie. Got a great idea for a community service project? Propose it. Short on ideas but want to help? Watch the weekly and monthly newsletter for projects that you can participate in. By the end of December, we'll have sign-up tables during coffee hour and Sign-up Genius ready for your online sign-up. Okay, Willie, let's bring it home. Got it. Well, you can tell we're all a little rusty, and that's why we need your help. Don't forget to join the team. Spring training and March 5th will be here before you know it. Thank you.
Once again, please join in our opening hymn, number 389.
do it again. It's a two-part round. So group one, gathered here in the mystery of the hour. Gathered here in one strong body. Gathered here in the struggle and the power. Let's try 4 parts this time. 4 parts.
Before I read the call to worship, I'd like to say that when we get our monthly newsletter or our weekly announcements, I like to look at the blurb and the title for the sermons and contemplate where I would think they would go. And these are my thoughts from my own experience of today's title on Unknowing God. I grew up being taught a Protestant and Presbyterian concept of God. Very likely anyone here who has grown up in a Protestant household had the same basic beliefs as myself. About 15 years ago, my concepts of God came into question. I began questioning many ideas I had grown up with. The nearest comparison I can give is my own concept of myself. I had grown up with ideas about who I was, what I was able or unable to do. I've gone through many transitions in the past 15 to 20 years, some rapidly, some trudgingly slow. The process was learning about things I believed were true, which I found out were not. Believing I was one thing and discovering later I was something or had the potential to be something I had not earlier believed. I began unknowing myself. I did this with my understanding of God as well. I began to unknow original sin. I began to unknow the Trinity. I began to unknow the need to be redeemed from my fallen self. As I began to unknow that God, the God of science, mystery, and nature, became more real to me. The God of sitting quietly and giving attention to the breath became more present. Unknowing God in my life is allowing my understanding to find what is truth for me. Join me in the path of unknowing God and growing spiritually in our search for truth. Come, let us worship together. Now, if you would join me in reading the words for the chalice lighting, which are on the front page of your order of service as Tom lights the chalice. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and, renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown.
I was up all night trying to write a song. Every turn of phrase just turned out wrong. Seemed I couldn't get out my own way. So I stepped out on the back porch to greet the new day. A little black and white bird on that old oak tree. Thought I was dreaming, started talking to me. Chick-a-dee-dee-dee, coo, coo, coo. You don't need wings to get a bird's eye view. Chick-a-dee-dee-dee, but ain't that hard when you can see the beauty in your own backyard. Well, then I heard a cackle. A crow said, hey, what's with the long face? It's a beautiful day if you can be still for a moment and let go. Maybe you can hear the beauty in the call of a crow. Chick-a-dee-dee-dee, coo, coo, coo. You don't need a wings to get a bird's eye view. Chick-a-dee-dee-dee, what ain't that hard when you can see the beauty in your own backyard? Do you dare to dream? Can you see the unseen? The beauty in everything. Now the stock market's crashing, don't give a damn. TV's nothing but goobers and spam, but I got a new song I'm gonna sing. It's a natural nirvana, zippity-doo-dah thing. Chick-a-dee-dee-dee, coo, coo, coo. You don't need wings to get a bird's eye view. Chick-a-dee-dee-dee, what ain't that hard when you can see the beauty in your own backyard? When you can see the beauty in your own backyard. There's a lot of beauty in your own backyard.
Each week, we hold in our service a time for sharing the joys and the sorrows that we bring with us into this faith community. It's during this time that we invite you, if you've come today with either a significant personal joy or a significant sorrow, you're invited to come forward to place a stone in the bowl, say your name into the microphone, and briefly share your joy or your sorrow. Let us enter into this time of tenderness and trust. Are there any joys and sorrows this morning?
My name is Jeannie Jansen, and I just want to appreciate the generosity of my son David, who, after our family Thanksgiving of 13 people, took it upon himself to do all the dishes and all the pots and pans so that Mother woke up the next morning to a clean kitchen. Wonderful.
Amber Brown. I'm here with the Joy today. We have our Aunt Louise visiting us from Pennsylvania to help us take care of baby Rainey before she goes to nursery, and she'll be here with us for 3 weeks, and it's such a wonderful blessing to have family visit us and get to know them better. So y'all say hi.
I have actually two stones. One is for a joy, and another is for a sorrow in our congregation. My joy is for a couple of visitors this morning. I think they're over there, John and Nancy Bryant, who are right down front. I missed you all the way back here. And John and Nancy are UUs from Texas and now from Fort Collins, but they were members of the congregation where I did my internship in suburban Dallas, Texas. So I've known them for 20 years, so it brings back lots of memories. And then the second stone is a stone of sorrow that Carol Genovese asked me to place. Carol shares that her sister, Nancy, who had a long journey with metastatic breast cancer, died early on Monday morning and is now resting in peace. Carol shares that she was fortunate and grateful to be able to spend time with her sister throughout the summer after she got her vaccine. So we hold Carol and Carol's family in our hearts this morning. A final stone is placed for all of the joys and sorrows that we hold in our hearts that were not spoken this morning. Won't you join with me in the spirit of prayer and meditation? Spirit of life, source of our being and our becoming, we hold in our hearts all the joys and sorrows of our community. On this weekend, which for many is a time of family togetherness, we hold gratitude. Gratitude for company shared, for nourishing meals, and for the delight of friends and family. Aware that for others it is a time of loss, bringing memories of those not able to be with us. We extend our thoughts of comfort, of understanding. In this mystery of life for which we are grateful, we remember all of the simple joys of life. The joys of community, of song, of wonder. The miracles of living, and of the great unknown always beyond us. mindful of the joys and sorrows which dwell in our hearts, invite us to hold a few moments of silence together as we listen for that still small voice inside. I invite you to be still with me for a time of silent meditation. As it is when we are in the presence of our truest selves, so may it also be in our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. Amen. I invite us to sing together our next hymn of the morning. It is another round, number 1009 in your teal hymnal, Meditation on Breathing, and our song leaders will help us sing it together.
Breathe. Let's just see that one more time before we go on. Breathe. Breathe. Now the altos. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love.
The reading this morning is a short excerpt from The Cloud of Unknowing. The Cloud of Unknowing is an anonymous work of Christian mysticism written in Middle English in the 14th century. The text provides a guide to the practice of contemplative prayer. This reading is from Carmen Acevedo Butcher's translation of the text. The first time you practice contemplation, you'll only experience a darkness, like a cloud of unknowing. You won't know what that is. You'll only know that in your will, you feel a simple reaching out to God. You must also know that this darkness and this cloud will always be between you and your God, whatever you do. They will always keep you from seeing God clearly by the light of understanding in your intellect, and will block you from feeling God fully in the sweetness of love in your emotions. So be sure you make your home in this darkness. Stay there as long as you can, crying out to God over and over again because you love God. It's the closest you can get to God here on earth, by waiting in this darkness and in this cloud. Work at this diligently as I've asked you to do, and I know God's mercy will lead you there. When we reach the end of what we know, that's where we find God. That's why Saint Dionysius said that the best, most divine knowledge of God is that which is known by not knowing.
I've been down, crawled under my bed to hide. I've been so high, cracked my head open on the sky. These cards that I've been dealt made me tough, but I wanna hold a handful of jokers when God calls my bluff. So let me die laughing, let me die happy, knowing life was good and I did what I could. Let me die laughing. I don't know what happens when you die, but I do know one day it'll be my time. Yeah, I cried and fought, loved without regret. It's this fear of an empty life, much deeper than my fear of death. So let me die laughing, let me die happy, knowing life was good and I did what I could. Let me die laughing. Yesterday was sunny, this morning life was funny, but even when it's not, I've learned to love this life I got. So let me die laughing, let me die happy, knowing life was good, I did what I could, maybe not always what I should. Let me die laughing, let me die laughing, let me die laughing.
Think of that closing line from the reading which Bill gave. The highest knowledge of God is that which can only be known through unknowing. What the heck does that mean? As I thought about my sermon for this Sunday, the image that kept coming to mind was that of a common cartoon gag, a single panel cartoon like you'd find in The New Yorker, perhaps. You've probably seen these cartoons in which there is a depiction of a hiker approaching the top of a mountain. We can tell that the climb has been long and arduous. Perhaps the hiker is drawn looking fatigued, unkempt, well-worn from the journey. And there at the top of the mountain sits a wisdom figure, usually drawn with a long beard and a monastic robe. That's how we know that they're a wisdom figure, I guess. And the hiker is not just a hiker, the hiker is a pilgrim, right? A spiritual seeker, a searcher, in search of truth, in search of meaning, perhaps in search of enlightenment. And they've journeyed all this way, all the way to the mountaintop to ask that wise one for knowledge, for clarity, for truth. And then the caption at the bottom of the cartoon contains the punchline. Whatever the particular punchline is in the cartoon, we know that the hiker, the seeker, is going to be deeply disappointed, let down, their deepest questions unanswered, their search for truth and meaning unfinished. In one such cartoon, Ziggy, poor Ziggy, reaches the top of the mountain only to be told by the wise figure, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. Poor Ziggy, that lovable loser, right? Now, a cartoon is just a cartoon, and it would probably be foolish to attempt to draw too much meaning from it. And analyzing humor is an exercise in diminishing returns. But these cartoons might hint at something that is true about the spiritual journey. Any attempt on the part of that wise figure to give a final, correct, absolute answer to questions of mystery and ultimate meaning would be unsatisfying. And the journey is not about the destination. A cynic might see these cartoons differently, concluding that there is no such thing as truth or meaning, that the wise figures are frauds, and that all spiritual searching is pointless. But I'm not a cynic. In Unitarian Universalism, the search for truth and meaning is just that. It's a search. And that is good. Let's back up for a second. Why am I preaching a sermon called Unknowing God? What does that even mean? Why did I choose as a reading for this morning a passage from a mystical Christian text from the 14th century? What possible relevance could a text about contemplative prayer have for this community, all of us, when I'm pretty sure that none of us are monastics, and quite a number of us are not people who find the concept of God meaningful or helpful? This morning, I want to talk about unknowing, and paradoxically, the importance of unknowing in religious growth. In the book A Chosen Faith, well-known UU minister John Behrens offers the following bit of wisdom. He says, "When someone tells me they don't believe in God, I often reply, 'Tell me about the God that you don't believe in, because chances are I don't believe in that God either.'" And in the last book he wrote before he died, another well-known UU minister, Forrest Church, seems to double down on this idea, writing, quote, "I say to my congregants, if you believe in God, the best thing you can do for yourself is to suspend your belief for a while, because undoubtedly your God is too small and you must grow beyond that God. And on the other hand, if you don't believe in God, your very disbelief is a stumbling block. Kick it away and place your faith in something more ennobling than disbelief." It's such striking advice, isn't it? Go home from church and say, "My minister told me to stop believing in God." But he's not just saying this to be contrarian and difficult and a jerk. What they seem to be writing about, Bereans in Church seem to be describing, is this path of religious unknowing. Religious unknowing, far from being a kind of non-belief, is actually a deeper way of believing. In his call to worship at the beginning of the service, which I loved so much, Bill described his own path of growth through unknowing, challenging ideas about himself and challenging ideas about God. And that act of challenging was necessary to lead towards a more expansive view of the self and a more expansive view of God. The same thing often happens in our youth religious education programs. I think in particular of our 9th grade coming of age program. If you've ever been a mentor to a 9th grader, or if you've ever been a parent to one, or if you've listened to them as they've stood in the pulpit and given their credos, you're probably familiar with this kind of religious unknowing. Tell me about the God you don't believe in. And the thing is, instead of being a kind of rejection, this unknowing is actually a developmentally appropriate step towards spiritual growth. It's necessary for larger religious ideas to break through. As I was in the throes of writing this sermon, I reached out to a few of my minister friends to ask their thoughts. And one of the first to respond was my colleague, Reverend Molly Hausch-Gordon. Molly actually sent me the text of a sermon she had delivered a number of years ago entitled "The Wisdom of Uncertainty, or In Defense of Ignorance." And her sermon was inspired by the writings about unknowing by a 15th century German mystic, Nicholas of Cusa. Molly's sermon made me say to myself, among other things, okay, so maybe this topic is not as weird or as far out there as I thought. Maybe I am in good company here. Molly explains unknowing with the help of a contemporary theologian, Catherine Keller, who writes about the difference between willful ignorance and mindful ignorance. Willful unknowing and mindful unknowing. I want to read an excerpt from Molly's sermon explaining this distinction. Willful ignorance, willful unknowing, which I might add is so common in our world, is an ignorance oblivious to itself. It emerges as the opposite of learned ignorance, that learning that knows its own ignorance and therefore does not cease to learn. Willful ignorance serves to obfuscate or mystify on behalf of some desired absolute. It holds facts to be true in spite of proof to their contrary. It ignores all it does not know. But mindful ignorance, on the other hand, minds all it does not know. It drives further learning rather than halting learning with some certain claim to truth. Mindful ignorance leads us straight into the mystery, straight into the luminous darkness, the incomprehensible place beyond reason where the deepest truths abide. In the mystical tradition, which is fascinating to me, texts like Nicholas of Cusa and Julian of Norwich and the Cloud of Unknowing that Bill read from, there is this idea that there is always a cloud of unknowing that envelops us even as we seek and search after God and pour our hearts and our souls and our minds and our spirits into this effort of discovery. And far from being cynical or pessimistic, there's actually a beauty in there, a beauty of being able and willing to sit in that darkness of unknowing, to feel at home in that cloud. How do you feel about that? Is that good, or is that tremendously frustrating? Are you like Ziggy, that when you get to that mountaintop and you do not find a good answer, is that a disappointment, or is that something to be enjoyed and cherished? It's probably a little bit of both. This is now my 8th fall with you all, and I have been known to joke that I really only have 2 sermons for the holiday season. And each year you're going to get one or you're going to get the other. Sometimes both if I have to preach twice. The first one is the one that I'm not giving this morning. It's the political holiday sermon. And no, political is not a dirty word. The political Christmas sermon says, listen, that Christmas story, it's hard to tell without the census of Caesar, without King Herod feeling threatened, without the Holy Family having to flee to Egypt as asylum seekers. The political Christmas sermon tells the story of an occupied people living under empire. Just as the political Hanukkah sermon says, listen, that lack of oil in the temple is not because someone forgot to do the holiday shopping or because of problems with the supply chain. The story is about a religious, cultural, and political struggle for freedom and autonomy. That's my one holiday sermon. My other holiday sermon, which is the one that I'm giving, says that we should delight in mystery and wonder and miracle and uncertainty and unknowing. This morning in the Christian tradition is the first Sunday of Advent. Now, Unitarian Universalism is not big on liturgical seasons, and our culture really isn't big on liturgical seasons either. Advent is not supposed to be a busy, materialistic and consumerist time, but our culture is not good at being other than that. Advent instead is a countercultural time, a time of watchful waiting that leans into darkness, embraces mystery, feels at home in that cloud. This evening is the first night of Hanukkah, the Jewish holiday which celebrates a miracle in the rededicated temple. There is poetry and mysterious power in that oil lamp that stays lit for 8 days, reminding us that there are greater resources of joy, greater resources of hope, greater resources of strength available to us even in the midst of hardship and difficulty. One of my favorite readings for this season comes from UU minister Richard Gilbert. He offers these instructions for this season. Let us learn to play with life, at least for a time, for now we seem to work too hard at it. Let us learn to sing when we've only spoken. Let us learn to enjoy the cadences of poetry. Let us make room for fancy while we give fact a rest. Let us play for a time in the fields of myth and legend, for news and facts to make it will always be there. Let us sample the whimsical words of the poets more than the studied works of scholars. Let our thoughts roam in the realms of imagination, rather than linger in quagmires of reality. And so may hope find its way into our hearts, even when our minds tell us there is no hope. May charity speak to us even when we have nothing to give. And may loving kindness be with us, even when the stores of love are exhausted. There's a spiritual tradition which embraces the mystery, embraces the unknowing, embraces that mindful ignorance, that idea that there is more outside of my own brain, more outside of my own mind, more outside of my own senses than I am aware of. That holds an awareness for what we do not know. The challenge is to hold that and embrace that with a warmth and a wonder. It is only through unknowing God that we open the space for more growth, for more wonder, for more love and more light. And our closing hymn this morning is one of hymn that speaks, I think, to this wonder, or at least the tune makes me think of this wonder. It's an Advent hymn, number 225, O come, Emmanuel. And prior to the greening, which will commence shortly after the service, I invite us to rise in body or in spirit and to sing our closing hymn of the morning. And I should just say before we do that the greening is not going to start right away. I think we're going to give some time for the worship associates and a couple others to kind of bring out the greens and the garlands. We can enjoy some coffee and some conversation, and then make our way back in here to decorate and deck the halls. Let us sing together number 225.
Before we read the words for extinguishing the chalice, I would like to remind you to place your gift in the basket while exiting the sanctuary. And let's give a note of thanks to Eric for his music. Please join me in reading the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And once again, as a community of inclusiveness, if you want to hold hands singing Shalom, put your hands by your side. If you'd prefer not, you can just cross your arms.